What's up, guys? Welcome back to the shop. Today we're making a cleaver out of this leaf spring. As you can tell, it's pretty curved, so I'm pretty sure it's leaf spring and not just some random steel. But in case you're not sure if it's leaf spring or not, you can always grind test it, see if it's throwing out sparks. But I know it's a piece of leaf spring, so we're good there. And I'm going to be making a cleaver. This is more steel than what I really need, so I'm just going to start working it down, and then I'll end up cutting off any excess that I don't need. I'm going for an 8-inch cleaver with about a 6-inch handle, and this piece of leaf spring is 3/16 thick, so I got more than plenty of material. Fly. Nope. So this piece is 3/16 thick, and I got more than plenty of material from here, so we're going to go with it. Alright guys, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to straighten out our piece. That way we have a nice flat surface to work on. Little backstory for this piece. I'm actually making this to send with my dad to Mexico because I made one of these before previously, like probably 2-3 years ago. And that's when I was like, you know, making some very crappy stuff. Now it's still kind of crappy, but not as much. But pretty much I made a knife out of a cleaver out of leaf spring, and I gifted it to my father, and he uses it at the house, and he asked me to make one so that he can go take to my uncle next time he goes to Mexico. So pretty much that's the reason why I'm making this guy. So this guy definitely won't be for sale. And I'm doing a brute to forge finish on it just because it's going to be just a workhorse of a knife. It's not really going to be much of anything other than for that. I'm not really going for looks. I'm going for utility. And so I'm not going to be as fancy with this guy as I am with other knives. But I am definitely going to make something that's, you know, what I need it to be. So here I'm cutting off the excess with my cutting tool on my press. And I ended up cutting it a little short, so I ended up struggling quite a bit to get the full length that I needed. But I did have enough steel, so it was just a matter of trying to move it in the right directions at the right places. So here I'm trying to get as much of the length as I can. In instances that I'm doing work like this, where I'm trying to extend and get it really thin, it's really a difficult thing to do with a hydraulic press because it sucks the heat from the piece so fast, and it's not as malleable the thinner it gets. So it's definitely has its own benefits to having a press, but at the same time there's also those downsides. I really wish I had a power hammer, even with a smaller one like a 50-pounder. I could make quick work of this and make quick work of extending the steel to the length that I need while still having it be relatively thin. But since I have neighbors and I'm not a jerk, I decided to opt out for just having a hydraulic press. If and when I get to move to a more commercial setting, more industrial setting, or I buy another area that has more space like acreage or something where I have a little bit more distance between neighbors, then I definitely would be investing into a power hammer of some sorts, and that would make this work a lot easier. Another issue that I ran into in this build is that whenever I separated the steel for my handle, it pulled that part that I'm working on, it pulls it down a little bit because that press, it is not a sharp edge that does the movement there, so it kind of just pulls the steel down and curves it down. That's one mistake that hopefully I remember next time and I don't make, because that really limits the amount of heel I can have on this knife. Ideally, I wanted about 3 1/4, 3 1/2. I ended up with 3 at the end of the build. So that was a bummer, but overall, all I have to do is make a specific die that has almost like the guillotine. Some people have guillotines that they put onto their hardy hole, and they use that guillotine to give them that clean transition that they need to have for the steel not to move that way. So all I have to do is make my own and have it attached to the press. Essentially, it's just gonna be a right triangle, believe, yeah, it's just essentially going to be a right triangle, and it'll essentially just cut on the press, and it'll move the material to the side or to the back, and that'll help me once I do the rest of the pressing. It'll help not to damage the heel of the knife, and it's something I've been meaning to do for a while. I just never got to doing it, but after this build and seeing what happened there, I definitely am gonna invest a little bit of time and make that tooling. And you can see here where I'm cutting it, I'm actually moving it forward because it has less than 3 inches towards more of the tang, so that's material that just ends up being cut off. And here I'm just going to do standard stock removal, get that tang exactly where I want it. It's a longer tang than I would normally do, but since the knife that I made for my father back a few years ago, it had a very long tang because I had no idea what I was doing. But he likes it and he asked for a 6-inch tang, or I guess in this case it's handle. I don't know why I keep calling it a tang, but he asked for it that way, so I decided to adjust it a little bit to make sure that I can grip it in different ways in case I want to grab it from the tail end and use it as leverage, or if I want to hold it in a pinch grip, or I just want to grip it more towards the heel of the knife. Unfortunately, I had a slightly hardened handle on this knife, and it was just barely enough to not let the drill bit go all the way through. Alright, so I had to put this guy back in the forge overnight and let it cool down slowly because these guys were way too hard. The drill bit went almost all the way through but didn't go all the way through, so hopefully this softens it up and I can drill through it. And if not, that's gonna suck. So let's give it another try. I'm gonna switch out the bit too. I'm gonna put a new bit, that way it's sharper. So here I put on a brand new drill bit, and I'm not sure if it was the drill bit that did the difference or the fact that I softened it overnight. I'm pretty sure it was the softening, but a new drill bit did not hurt, and it definitely went through the steel like butter, and I had no issues afterwards. So I'm gonna chalk that up as a very big win on my part. So now it's time for our maker's mark and to get the knife ready for our quench. And here we quench. Alright guys, so we're at a temper. It's looking pretty good. It's not too bad on the straightness. It's actually pretty straight overall, except towards the spine here, towards the end, but I think I just have more material on one side than on the other. But I can fix that, no big issue, and overall things looking pretty good. I'm gonna center line my bevels and we'll start grinding them in. Overall I'm very happy with it. Feels good in the hand. If I want to grab it back here for, you know, a heavy chopping motion, you know, work out pretty well. Overall, good stuff, good stuff. While I was drilling, I noticed that I had some very baby warps in the edge of the knife, so I decided to turn over the plane and just straighten it all out. It worked out pretty well, and I had a nice straight edge at the end of it. Here I'm using some muriatic acid on this knife so I can soften up the scale, since I hadn't done that before. Definitely, if you're going to do this, do it in a very well ventilated area that has good airflow, and don't be around it, because these are very harsh chemicals, and definitely have proper PPE whenever doing this kind of stuff. But that acid really does a good job. Normally I do it in PVC, but it doesn't fit because it was too big, so I ended up doing it like that. and it did quick work of that scale, and it gives it a very beautiful finish. Definitely make sure to always neutralize the acid before you start grinding, and you should be good. Here I'm using Paduk for my handle material because Paduk is a very solid and resilient wood. I've noticed I have a couple knives that I use in my house that have Paduk on them, and the wood does lose its vibrance after a while, so you do have to oil it up. But other than that, I mean, it's solid stuff and it doesn't warp, so it works very good for kitchen knives if you're not using any of the stabilized stuff. And the knives I have in my kitchen, I've had for probably about a year and a half ish, and I've had no issues at all, so I'm very happy with this wood. Here I decided to try out something different, and I'm using some Scotch-Brite belts just to finish off that part of the knife, give it a nice beautiful shine, and then I'm going to put it in some acid to make some beautiful contrast between the forged finish and the grounded area. And by acid I mean ferric chloride, which, if you don't know what ferric chloride is, it's what we use to etch our knives for Damascus or any kind of layered construction. And I'm pretty happy with the way it turns out. It's like a darkish grayish, so it definitely has some pretty nice contrast. Here I'm using G-Flex for my epoxy. I switched it out for the old epoxy I was using. I had issues with, so I ended up ordering this stuff. This is what it was recommended to me by basically everybody, and it has a 45-minute or 75-minute work time. I think 75-minute, but it says 45-minute pot life. I don't know what that means, so I'm just gonna assume it's a 45-minute work time, and it worked beautifully. It mixed beautifully, and I wasn't in a hurry for the first time ever, so I really took my time and make sure everything was nicely coated, which actually saves epoxy for me because I have to mix less because I'm not just throwing it everywhere. So yeah, overall I had a very positive experience with the G-Flex, and it dried perfectly well and I had zero issues, so I'm very happy with that, and hopefully it always works for me because I don't like having issues with epoxy not drying. It's a pain, and definitely when you're trying to keep a schedule and then you go grab your knife and that thing's all gooey and definitely not stuck together. So yeah, very many headaches came with the other epoxy, but it seems we are good now with the new G-Flex that we are using. And here I'm just sculpting the handle. I'm not really doing much but knocking over the corners of the knife and then rounding it over just to make it a beefy but comfortable grip. And I don't see many makers do this, and I do this on basically every knife. I just don't always record it, but I do always like to go over it with an orbital sander, and especially on knives without pins, because on knives with pins I don't really do it that often because of the pins and that they kind of get in the way, but it gives it a very nice finish, and I use it with the 220 just to knock over any different areas that I have that need blending and whatnot, and it helps prepare it so that I can then go with sandpaper and hand sand it all. So here is the finished product. It's a very nice cleaver. It's a 3" by 7.5 ish on the edge, and it's definitely gonna be a workhorse, and I hope it gets a lot of use, and I hope my uncle likes it. Well, as always guys, thank you very much for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you liked the video, and I really appreciate you guys for taking time and watching these videos, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.